whatnot. But I think the manager had mentioned a couple of meetings ago, maybe it's a joint question, a couple of meetings ago about growing the city, and I forget the number, 20 million a year in assessed values, or there was some number that we...
300,000 to 500,000 in net new tax base.
Net new tax base. Now, I can't quite convert that in my head, but what does that mean in terms of assessment? If we're trying to grow the taxes 300,000 to 500,000 a year, somehow there has to be a value of new property, or...
Divided by the $14.86 of the city's tax rate for him.
Okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean, is there a quick calculation? Why she talks about that or finds that? My question is does your planning and economic development budget provide enough support on the planning and marketing and development side to support the manager's 300,000 to 500,000 a year? Or is it significantly way underfunded, or it's fine?
We've all felt the loss of the one position that we haven't had since last October, because I've had to do all the marketing, which typically would be that position's responsibility. But other than that, I have felt if that position were filled, that we're in good condition to meet that challenge. I mean, we've been adding commercial development here every year, and I don't know where housing equity seems to be another story, and I think part of that figure that you've been talking about also includes increased equity in residential, and increased residential units as well. But
No, honestly, I wasn't
You
factoring
weren't-
that in.
weren't
That would
factoring that
be what did we call it at the last budget hearing? A pleasant surprise.
right.
So yeah, some neighborhoods are going to increase in value. They already are. Some neighborhoods are going to languish and stay the same, and some neighborhoods are going to decline in value. It's going to be based upon the conditions of those neighborhoods, and
And if we had the money, to be honest, if I was sitting here saying, I could ask for anything I want, I would love to have a position in there. We don't have a position in there that really is knowledgeable on the housing development side, or certified on the housing development side, in terms of some of the projects that are going on around the community, or might go on around the community. We don't have that. So I'm grateful for the manager's background actually in that area. So, but being where we are right now, we can get it done with what we have if I can get that other position filled.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I'm trying to figure out, just from a philosophical point
Right.
of view,
If it's realistic.
if what we're talking is $300,000 to $500,000 in new taxes each year. For
new
the
tax
next-
base. Yes.
New tax base for the next 3 or 4 years. I think Mary's doing some calculations there, so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what...
And one of the benchmarks that we've added to the economic development chapter, the master plan that's new, and it's the draft chapter at this point, is increase in home equity. Because that's clearly a sign of health for the community, that you've got some supply and demand and people wanting to move in and wanting to invest in homes.
Yeah,
So-
and that leads to the question that Assistant Mayor raised about people were able to afford homes and mortgages but couldn't afford taxes. So I'm looking, if the taxes stabilize and you're able to grow the taxes 300,000 to 500,000, I don't know what the assessment has to be to get that tax. But perhaps later in the evening, Mary, when you've had a chance to just run a quick number, I don't know if it's 10 million or
Well, just
100 million.
Just for quick, back of the envelope purposes, the original plan for the Peterson Mill building, for instance, was 47 units of condominiums. So that would have been, but aside from what was going to go into the building, the developer was planning approximately $9.5 million to be the value of the building at the end. That's what we were planning to assess it for. That would have brought in approximately just doing the math really quickly, $345,000 in net new tax base.
Right.
So you can see that a roughly $9.5–10 million in aggregate value yields about $350,000, $400,000 in net tax base.
So the 10, maybe Mary doesn't need it, 10 million. Yeah, and I wasn't sure if it was 10 million or 40 million. I just didn't do the math and was concerned about that a little bit to make sure this supports that. But, you know, there's not a whole lot more services that can be cut. There may be, and that's a topic for another discussion before we approve this budget, but.
Yeah, I think the different ways that people calculate it, as as Mary said, some folks just use the city assessment of approximately $15 per 1,000. I usually use the entire, citywide tax, because that's what the developer is going to have to use when they're calculating the cash flows and the costs of the project. So I always try to use the whole 4260, whatever it is.
But he can only spend the 1486.
Correct.
No, I understand
Correct.
that, but, and this council does not control the school, but certainly there's a lot of people in the public that watch both, and it's kind of a global question if you want to think of it that way. The city has got to grow, is it 10 million or 15 million? About $10 million in assessed value each year for the next 3 years.
Right. And we have actually typically done that.
Right.
The problem in the past couple years has been you grow that much, but then there's also that corresponding loss in aggregate property value that drags it down, and we've been negative on the spread.
And the state.
Even in, yeah,
And the
and the state as well. Even in my plan, I'm assuming that the potential in the first couple years is going to be tighter on the spread. I want to try to stay on the positive side of it, that we're going to be bringing in enough to, offset any additional loss in property value. But I'm also, been talking with our team, and we're starting to see some positive property values across the city. So I'm also hoping that the large-scale erosion in property value has been stemmed, and the tide is starting to reverse ever so slowly.
That's all I had. Just a philosophical question.
Yes, Councilor Raymond.
Yeah, I don't know if, not in this budget this year, I'm not sure when we did it last, I think it was a couple years ago, reassessment. And I'm talking about total reassessment where they actually go out and visit the houses and go through them, because I think that's gonna, I hear people talk about people selling homes today. If you look at what the real estate office has it listed as, is what it has on the tax card. It might be a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, unfinished basement on the tax card, but on the real estate offices, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, finished basement. So things have been done, and we're not collecting the taxes on it.
We were talking about that this morning at our NICE team
We
meeting.
were.
We were talking about illegal apartment units, but
Right.
but in that same conversation, you're right. We were saying that we have to try to. KRT is out doing inspections now, so we were going to contact KRT and ask them what, are they starting to see those very same things that you just brought up?
There's a discrepancy there that we probably could gain a little bit of tax dollars there. Not a lot, but I'm sure it's going to.
And that is something that I've started to reevaluate, because the way these assessments are done here in New Hampshire is different from my experience. So whereas we're only doing the 25% per year, I would like to perhaps add more money to the assessing budget and try to get more inspections done, so that we can try to see if there is uncaptured work done out there.
It's the only way to get the true
Right.
dollar of what
Absolutely.
we should be getting. So,
I agree
yeah.
100%.
Well, that one year, we lost, what, 100 million in valuation? That was a real kick in the pants.
It is frustrating because, there is a lot that's been going on, and there's been a lot of new construction, there are a lot of new jobs, there's a lot of new investment, and it's not just this year, but the last, really, it's sort of been consistent. But you're not seeing it in the tax rate, and it's certainly frustrating for our department, because we're out there, we're seeing it, we're helping them, get up and running, and then the tax rate goes up. But I don't want people to lose track of the fact that there are a lot of jobs out there right now, and there are companies growing, and there's new construction, That's all on the positive side of things.
And we're also, I mean, not in individual people's homes, but in the aggregate, like on Pleasant Street in our downtown. I mean, the aggressive efforts that we're having with code enforcement are pushing some of these investor owners to either sell their buildings or finally make investments in them. The whole, they buy a building and it sits there for years and years and years, is the patience is over. Pleasant Street has waited too long. The time is now.
Good, thank you.
Yes, Assistant Mayor Bergeron?
I just want to follow up on something that Councilor Temple said. I had a young couple come look at my house today, and he's concerned, and they both are, because of one thing. They didn't get enough money for a mortgage, but what scares them is the taxes. Can they afford to keep the taxes going?
The mayor and I, had a conversation with a local bank president, and they had explained that this isn't unique to Claremont by any stretch of the imagination. It's not unique to New Hampshire. That even in New Jersey, the property taxes are going up and up as municipalities face higher expenses, and they have no other alternate revenue streams. Again, bank lending, is a tricky thing because they'll see disparities across different towns. It's hard for them to factor in all of the different tax rates, but you're right, it does have an impact once people understand what their tax burden will be.
Right, and it's qualifying some of their people who apply for the loan. They might qualify for the mortgage, they might qualify for the taxes, but you keep adding on. At a certain point, some buyers don't qualify anymore.
And some of that could be, indicative of the sale price. That may also be some of the reasons that we're seeing the depressed sale prices, because as folks want to unload their homes and people get pre-approved and then knocked out because of the tax bill, they have to corresponding lower their property value to bring the people back into the area where they were approved. The taxes are what upset the original financing.
But then that reduces the demand to move into Claremont. So, and it reduces people's desire in many cases to buy a home in here because they're afraid that they're not going to build up equity.
Right.
So there are a lot of issues, and I don't want to spend too much more time because we're on a budget discussion, but I do have some budget questions, and I'm happy to continue this conversation at a later date. I think it's important to have this discussion, but right now I want to focus, we have several departments to go through.